Hi, I'm Ari Lynette, and Anastasia's second newest palette got me thinking about some things. Here's what. So first of all, I want to apologise for my makeup looking really muddy and messy today. I went in to do a quick look with Subculture, and I quickly realised that you don't do quick looks with Subculture, because it's something you work with and focus on, and now this is kind of muddy and messy, but I suppose it isn't too bad. And I added one of the shimmers from Prism on the lid, which I really like, because I like to combine the mattes of Subculture with the shimmers from Prism. I just find it allows for a little more versatility. I'm also wearing Griffin from the ABH matte lipstick formula. So the reason I'm decked out in ABH today is because the new Jackie Aina palette by Anastasia Beverly Hills and Jackie got me thinking about a certain trend that's been coming up within Anastasia Beverly Hills palettes over the past few years. And before I get into that, I do want to talk a little bit about Jackie's palette. I think this is a really nice palette. I think it's very suited to the target market. I think it's good that there is a palette that is tailored toward people with deeper skin tones. I feel like there are some interesting colours in here. It's a good combination of neutral colours and some slightly more adventurous tones. I like the packaging. I like the marketing. I just think it's an excellent all-around palette. And I know that Jackie isn't perfect, but I think that she's definitely a great representation for women of colour in the beauty community and really being outspoken about that. I think we need people like her in the community that are outspoken, don't hold back in terms of their activism, and really being open and honest about that. I think that's something we need more of. I think that often there are people that don't really stand for anything in the community. And especially in this day and age, we need people who are willing to fight against things that are wrong in the makeup industry. People that will help brands expand foundation ranges. People that will help make palettes specifically tailored to people of colour. We need people like that. And that's why I think that despite the controversies that have gone on around Jackie, overall I think she is a force for good in this community, and I'm glad that she has a palette with ABH. All that being said, I'm not getting this palette, and it's simply because I know I don't need this. The colours are really nice, but I have similar colours. Even in Riviera, I feel like I have similar colours to like the pink and the purple in this palette. I feel like overall, I just don't need to get this palette, even though it's nice. Like, it's a nice palette, but I don't have this overwhelming need for it. And what I've been really trying to do is to figure out which of the pops of colour I'm most attracted to, why I'm most attracted to them, do I have dupes of them in my collection? Like, one of the shades in Jackie's palette is this gorgeous red shade called Wigglies, and there is a similar shade in my collection that looks quite a bit like it. It's Mirage over here from HVJ Flare palette, a shade I don't use often enough, and I realised if I really like that shade from Jackie's palette, I can get it from here. So I was thinking about duping out her palette with different eyeshadows for my collection, and that made me realise something. Most of the palettes that I don't buy from Anastasia Beverly Hills have at least like 2 or 3, maybe even like 4 pops of colour that really appeal to me. Then the rest of it's kind of just fine to me. But there's a couple of different colours that I look at and I'm like, oh my goodness, I would love those colours as like a single. 2 of the colours I'm talking about are actually singles by ABH, but ABH's singles are expensive, so we don't go there. But this got me thinking, and I decided to do a little bit of paint, PowerPoint, mashup, mock-up, trickery, and I decided to make my ideal Anastasia palette made up of all of these random shades that I'd taken out of 4 different... can I count? 4 different palettes that I did not buy from ABH. So that is Modern Renaissance, Soft Glam, Norvina, the first Norvina, not this new Pro Pigment thing, and then the Jackie Aina palette. So for some reason I forgot to include Sultry, and I don't know why, but I think the only colour that really appeals to me from that palette, maybe the coral, but mostly that light grey colour. But by that point I'd already put together this palette and I thought it looked great. I also haven't included the 3 palettes I already own from Anastasia, Riviera, Subculture and Prism. I already have those palettes, there's no point pulling in repeat shades. And I also haven't included the Alyssa Edwards palette, because there's still a big part of me that's considering getting that. I don't know. That's just a palette I would gladly take on its own. But this palette, which I've lovingly named the Frankenstasia palette, is made up of colours from Modern Renaissance, Soft Glam, Norvina, and the Jackie Aina palette. So without further ado, here it is. So, here's the Frankenstasia palette. As you can see, there's kind of a theme with the more colourful shimmers, but I really like how these colours play with each other. It's quite an even mix of mattes and metallics, and there are even some neutrals that I really wanted to include. I think there's something quite opulent about this palette, and it almost seems like a holiday release, but that's just my take on it. So, let's get on to the breakdown of the specific shades. In this palette, there are 3 shades from Norvina, 2 shades from Modern Renaissance, 4 shades from Soft Glam, and 5 shades from Jackie's palette. I included my 2 favourite shimmers from Norvina, which are Wild Child and Celestial, and then I just had to put Soul in there because that's just such a beautiful colour to me and very unique. From Modern Renaissance, I added my 2 favourite shades, Buon Fresco and Railgar, just because I've always loved those 2 shades. From Soft Glam, I based my choices on my favourite shades from the Revolution Velvet Rose, which is the dupe for this palette. My favourite shades are Orange Soda, just as a really nice introductory shade, then Mulberry for deepening because that tone is stunning, and then Bronze, which is the real standout from the metallics. I also wanted a black in this palette, because I just think you can do so much with a black eyeshadow, so Noir slipped in there too. And finally, a grand total of 5 shades from the Jackie Aina palette made it into Frankenstasia. I chose Supreme and Bigwig because I wanted some colourful mattes, and these remind me a lot of Riviera. Then I chose Trust Issues because I love a white metallic, especially if it has a green shift. I chose Sponsored because, again, it's a green, and it's just a colour that really appeals to me. And then finally I chose Wigglies because it's my favourite colour from Jackie's palette overall. Here's the breakdown of the number of shades from each palette, and just for shits and giggles I decided to work out some percentages. It's like a 23andMe for eyeshadow palettes. But here are the figures. It's 14.3% Modern Renaissance, 21.4% Norvina, 28.6% Soft Glam, and 35.7% Jackie Aina. All of these figures have been rounded up to 1 decimal place, and it gives a rough idea of what Frankenstasia is made up of. So here's the palette again without the annotations. It even has a little cover. But I hope you like the look of this palette. Now back to my face! So that was my Frankenstasia palette. If I had to look at this colour scheme, I'd be thinking like this is a very quintessential holiday style palette. I think it's just those green, gold and red shimmers, I think paired together make something very Christmassy. But hey, I think this would be quite a nice holiday release, if I do say so myself. I'm giving myself far too much credit for putting together shades that already exist. But I think there's a lot of benefit to breaking down palettes, looking at specific shades, thinking, do you have them in your collection? How would you use those shades? But then also taking them and making something new, even if it's just a mock-up on paint or something. I find a lot of fun in that. So I'm not just making this video to kind of talk about this palette I've made. I really wanted to get some feedback from you. And that's not just in a I want engagement kind of way, because y'all know some people in the Snapchat fams and stuff. But I really want to get your opinion on whether you have the same thing that I do. With Anastasia palettes that you don't have, assuming that you don't have all of the collection, which if you do, that's awesome. But you could easily do this with other brands of eyeshadow too. Are there specific palettes that you don't have, but you would love to have a specific colour out of? Do you feel like a combination of those shades could make its own palette? Do you think there's potential in that concept? Am I just crazy? I'd be really interested to see what pops of colour really interested you in terms of specific shades. Like with me, I was immediately drawn to Wigglies from the Jackie palette, and then with the Modern Renaissance palette, I immediately had Railgar and Buon Fresco in my mind. Like, do you have any examples like that? Because I'd like to know I'm not completely crazy with that mentality. It's also quite interesting considering the pop of colour phenomenon that was a big thing like a while back. Was that like a year ago or something? It feels like the time just goes by so quickly. Especially in like beauty community terms, it's just like zooms past. But it definitely gets me thinking about the different pops of colour that go into palettes. If you took those out of different palettes and put them all together in one palette, what would that look like? Would it all be interesting colours? Would it create something dynamic and exciting? Or would it just be a sea of metallic blues? With some of these companies, it might be the last one. However, I would really like to know if you've experienced a similar thought of making like a Franken palette, even if it's just mentally, out of different palettes that you don't own. And if you do have any kind of mock-ups or like concepts, send them to me. Obviously you can't do video responses anymore on YouTube. That got pushed to the side years ago. But like Instagram, Twitter, send me it. You think that it's not worth sending and it might be a waste of my time? Send it anyway. I'm not very efficient with time. I would love to see some stuff. Seriously, I'd love to see some more people putting out videos that are creating concepts and taking bits and pieces and putting them into something. I like that creative aspect. So if you have something to say on that front, even if it's completely unrelated to this topic, I just want to take a moment to say, do it. Because that kind of creativity is really underrepresented and I want to see more of it. But enough of my statement on the state of the beauty community and palette mock-ups. That's all for today's video. I hope you like this palette. I've been Arlenette, you've been amazing, and that was the Frankenstasia palette. And it's probably never going to exist, but at least we have it in our memories. Bye!
Thanks for watching. If you like this, give it a thumbs up and come say hi in the comments. You can find me on Twitter at @ArlenetWork and on Instagram at Arlenette. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Love you for watching.